I am a senior leader. I work with high-powered people across the UK every day. I manage risk, finances, and people. The first time I was picked up by the police was at the age of 8. That's right, the first time I was picked up by the police was at the age of 8. I spent the next 20 years building a long list of criminal offences. I was in and out of prison for 10 years of my life. There was a time I believed I had 3 options. 1, keep doing what I'm doing and get killed. 2, overdose and die. 3, do something really bad and get banged up for life. That first contact as an 8-year-old child was for something kind of petty. That was my first contact with the criminal justice system. Put yourselves in my shoes. You're fearful, you're crying, and you're an 8-year-old child. You're going into a police station thinking, what's going to happen to me when I get out of here? What are my parents going to think? Have I let them down? Am I going to be punished for being a bad kid? When I was younger, I wasn't able to articulate myself properly. At school, I used to believe I wasn't as smart as the kid sitting next to me. I didn't know how to ask for help, so I fell behind. I was bored to death and started to misbehave. And when the teacher would say anything to me, I would give them attitude. The other kids would laugh. But looking back, I just needed help. No one was nurturing me in the education system. So, started truanting, wagging off school and stuff like that. By the age of 12, I was getting into fights, and I ended up getting excluded. I was placed in another school, and the same thing happened again. Eventually, I was taken out of the mainstream school and was placed in a special school for misbehaving kids. Everybody was in the same position as myself. Before that, I was doing petty crime, theft and nicking cars. When I ended up in the special school, the criminality escalated. I got into substance misuse and gangs and stuff like that. I was given my first custodial sentence when I was 16 years of age. I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. I was given community sentences before that. And I felt at that time the judges just thought, he's not really learning his lesson. He needs a custodial sentence now. When I walked into my first Young Offenders Institute, I was afraid. I was going into an environment that I didn't know nothing about. I walked into my cell. In the right-hand corner, seen a small hole in the wall. I thought, wow, this is meant to be a prison, isn't it? Next minute you hear someone shout at the hole, what's your name, mate? Is this your first time in prison? And then he told me about the do's and the don'ts. He told me, don't get into debt. Don't ask anything from anyone. Don't let people mug you off. Meaning, don't let people take advantage of you. That was the first time I felt like I was nurtured. He became like my peer support. I was in and out of prison from the age of 16 to 27. This is pretty typical. In 2021, the Ministry of Justice reported that a quarter of all people released from prison within the first year go back on to re-offend. Back in my days, that was much higher. More than half of us ended up back in prison. Repeating, going back in. Offences getting more serious and more consequences. Getting nicked, it was a norm for me then. Getting nicked was like an occupational hazard. Ride your time out. The mentality was so ingrained in me then, I didn't have any other expectations for myself. Looking back at who I am now and who I was then, I had the skills and expertise of a leader. No one had ever shown me or gave me the confidence to believe I could do something different. When I was in the system, doing criminal activity, believe it or not, I was doing pretty well for myself when I wasn't locked up. I had my designer gear, I was living well. To do this, I had to network, look at budgets, forecast, and manage my time. I learned how to build trust. For me to navigate the streets, I had to absorb everything I'd see. For example, I worked out that all police undercover cars were from the same fleet. They all started with the same number plate, the 2 letters. Believe it or not, they didn't think that through properly, did they? You think it's hard to memorize people's faces, people's names? I was memorizing faces, clothing, tattoos. If I seen that same person 10 minutes later, maybe they were undercover. Skills, attention to detail, risk management. I managed a supply chain of goods from procurement to consumption. I understood the supply and demand and the quality of the product. I employed people in my business, and I factored that into my financial planning. I was a leader on the streets. I saw potential in others. I would empower them and reward them, give them incentives and bonuses. If you've done a good job this week, you deserve an extra bit of dough. It was important for us to work as a team, to get the job done effectively, lead by example so people didn't take advantage. I didn't have any positive role models growing up. I didn't feel academically able because I had no qualifications. I hadn't been to school since the age of 13. I didn't understand my own skills. None of us did. For kids like me, to use our skills for crime was so norm for us then. No one showed us any difference. No one nurtured us in a positive direction. The first time I realized that I had potential when I met a geezer called Peter Yarwood. I decided then that I didn't want to go back to criminality. The consequences were getting worse, and I knew I had to change. One of my friends helped me get a job as a recovery coach. I met Peter at a training event. I looked at him, and he looked like one of the lads from the streets. He was in this strategic role, and I thought, hang on, I could do this. I do have the expertise. Leadership, negotiation, financial planning, risk management, analytical and critical thinking, being a change agent. I could use these skills differently. Peter didn't know what he did for me then. It was huge. I started to expect more for myself. Another time, I met an inspirational gentleman. The gaffer, Kevin Heffernan. He saw more in me again. He pushed me to continue growing and developing with work experience, paid for my qualifications, mentored me to fulfill my potential. He even went to college to sign up to my course. Now, I lead a national health and justice team for an organization, Career Matters, who works with people in prisons to support with them employment and release. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for Peter and Kevin. Now, it's my job to help employers understand the importance of lived experience, to take trauma-informed approaches in their decisions, creating job opportunities that specify lived experience, because we know that these are a valuable asset. NHS organisations are welcoming people with lived experience into non-clinical roles and clinical roles, because we know they do have the skills, they just need to be nurtured in the right way. It is estimated that ex-offenders are 9% less likely to commit further offences if they have a job. 9%. Imagine what that looks like for the streets that you walk on every day. Example, I met Liam in 2018. He'd been in prison 4 times in that 1 year for petty crime and rooted back to his addictions, like me. He hasn't been back in prison since working with me. I helped him to see his potential, to get a job where he adds value. He hasn't been back to prison over 5 years. How amazing is that? I work with people in prisons, and the recurring theme I hear is, I didn't know this was leadership skills. I didn't know that this was a quality. I say to them, the skills that you navigate the streets with, you could use them same skills applying for a job. They just need to be nurtured in the right way. Liam told me it started when I nurtured him. He needed motivation, self-belief, self-esteem, self-worth. He needed hope. He needed expectations for himself. As well as working in the prisons, I work with senior leaders in the NHS, the Ministry of Justice, His Majesty and Prison Services every day. I advise on policy changes. I have mobilized mentoring programs within the secure and detained estate. I am an asset to the CEOs and the stakeholders that I work with. Not do they just need to understand my lived experience to represent their people. I also have the skills that I've brought with me from the street. Planning, budgeting, risk management, and managing a team. In the UK, we rely on the NHS to keep us well. It's one of the biggest employers in the UK, and we know that they have a skill shortage which needs to be filled. There are over 100,000 job vacancies across the NHS organisations. How many of those vacant jobs could be filled from people leaving prison if someone like me and you to nurture them to thrive? What skills do you think they bring to the job? When they get there, how will you treat them? Will you continue to support them? I've shown that I've changed my life around, and I still face discrimination now. I recently went into a prison, and a prison officer walked into the room. What she saw was my designer clothes and my gold teeth. She mistook me for one of the lads. I showed her my keychain and I said, look, I might have been behind bars in the past, but I'm not a serving resident now. Here's my badge, love. I am your colleague. Her jaw dropped with embarrassment. Another occasion, I went into an NHS building, had an NHS lanyard around my neck. I had security called on me. Asian male, gold teeth, looks problematic. I've shown that change is possible. It instills hope into the lads looking up to me now. There's a circular economy here. Nurture people with skills. Let them add value to your organization. Keep them out of prison. Make our streets safer and our workforce more stable. You haven't got a skills gap. The people are there if you look for them in the right place. To nurture them in the right way. Don't give up on us, because we're a valuable asset. Together we can make the NHS and the rest of our society stronger.